Hey there folks, welcome back to another video putting together this collapse game in Python using the Pygame module. In the last video we made the game screen, the game board, and we put all the images to the screen, the tiles to the screen, so it's a very colorful tile board. In this video we're going to include a couple of functions that's going to allow us to see which cells are selected. It's going to basically increase the size of those tiles when they're under focus. It'll also select or find all the tiles that are next to that original tile, and it'll also bring them into focus. So that's quite a large function that we'll need to put in to get that to work correctly. Then once we've done that, I think we will then add the colorblind option as well, just for now. So yeah, let's get into it. Right, the first thing we need to do is we need to go up to our game initialization. Excuse me. Under our game loop, we want to include another little attribute. We're going to call it self dot image large image. I think it is self dot large image, and that's going to be equal to large image. Straightforward large image like that. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a function underneath our utility functions. So underneath create cell grid, underneath the create cell grid, we're going to create a function that's going to be called, we're going to define a function called focusAdjacentTiles. We're going to pass it the grid, and we're going to pass it the current cell. So we've defined a function called focusAdjacentTiles. We pass the arguments to the grid, and we've passed it the current cell. Alright, starting from this function, we're going to go with focusCells. We're going to create a list, and inside that list we're going to add the current cell already. Alright, therefore cell in focusCells. Right, we're going to get our xpos is going to be equal to the cell rectangle x position floored by 40, which is the cell size. We're going to get the y position, which is going to be equal to cell. I'm going to do this in brackets for now. Cell rectangle. No, I spelled it correctly, otherwise it won't work. Rectangle, y position, close the brackets, floored by 40. If the x position does not equal 0, right? So basically, what we've done here is the x position. So we've taken the position of this rectangle of that cell. Remember when we created the cells, each cell is a dictionary. So in each dictionary there is a value, a large image, and a normal image, and a large image, and then the Pygame, the rectangle of that cell. Right. So now we've taken the x position and the y position of each of that cell, which is here, the row by the cell size, column by the cell size, and we've floored it by 40. So that basically gives us a integer value, which should be relative to the grid to our grid, an index position on our grid. Let's put it that way. All right. So if the x position does not equal 0, so basically, if it's not on the very top line. So if the x is not, if the cell is not in the top line, in the top row, we can say if grid x pos -1, x pos -1, close brackets, right? And then the y pos, which is normal because we just want to look straight up. If the value of that cell is equal to our current cell's value, right? And grid, I'm just going to copy this little section across because it's quite not tedious to type it out the whole time. Alright, so now we're going to check. So we've basically checked to make sure that the two cells' values are the same. Then we want to check that this grid x pos -1, y pos is not in my focus cells group or list already, right? And then the next check we want to do, one more check we want to say, and that its status is still active, is equal, its active status is equal to the cell's active status. Right. If all three of those checks are met, then we want to add the cell. If we spell it correctly, we want to add the cell to our focus cells list. So what we're doing is we're looping through this focus cells list, and at the moment this focus cells list only has one item in it. And as we check this item, we check all the cells. So firstly we're checking the cell to the north of it, and if the cell to the north of it has the same value as this cell, and that the cell to the north of it is not already in the list, which it's not, and that the cell north of my current cell is active, and it's the same as what my current cell is. Right. If all three of those checks are met, we will then add this cell that we're checking. See there, that's wrong. Grid x pos minus 1, y pos. Right. We're then going to add this cell to my focus cells list, and then my loop will continue onto this cell, onto this new cell, and it'll do the same checks again. So in doing that, we'll basically be checking every cell to the north. So we're going north, 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 north. Right. Actually, the way we're doing this one is it'll go to the north, and then we're going to check the west or south, then east, then west, and then it'll come back to the loop again. Right. So I'm basically just quickly going to copy this little block of code, and I'm going to paste it here, and this time we're going to say if the x position is less than the length of the grid minus 1, right? If that's the case, then we're going to say to the south. So we want to check all the cells to the south of our current cell. And don't forget to make sure you've changed all of these to positives. So south, south, south. All right. So we've done that for the x and x positions. Now we want to do it for the y positions. Right. So we're going to copy that entire block of code, paste it at the bottom, and now we have to change the x positions to y pos. So check if the y pos does not equal 0. And then we want to change this to be like that. So the x position, we just want to check the normal x position, and then we want to check the y to the left or the right. Okay. Make sure you remember to go through and change all of these. Otherwise, you're going to run into a couple of issues. Right. Minus 1. Okay, and then the bottom here, we've got if the y position is less than the grid. There we want to say less than the grid. First list inside that list. Right. Then we want the x pos to be normal. We want to set y pos plus 1. Okay. I'm going to go y pos plus 1. And we're going to go x position, let's just be straightforward x position, and then y pos plus 1. And then the cell that we want to add to the list is y pos plus 1. Great. That's fairly straightforward. As I mentioned, we're now cycling through this list, so we're checking this current cell. So for the cell in the focus cell, so that current cell, we're working out the grid position of that cell. And then we're going to check first to the north of that cell, if that's the block to the north. Then we're going to check the block to the south. Then we check the block to the east. Is that west? Yeah, to the west. And then we check the block to the east. Right. So if that one meets all three requirements, it'll add the cell to here. And then it does the next check. And if it meets all the requirements, it adds this block to the cell. So now our list has grown to 3. So there's nothing to the east or west. So now our cell is. Then it'll move on to the second cell, and it'll do all these checks once again. remember, if we didn't include this little line here, this little check here, our focus cells list would grow infinitely because it would just constantly add the exact same cells over and over and over and over and over again. So that's why we have this little line here. Right. Now we've got our focus cells list. So now we've got a list of all the cells that we want to actually have focused when the mouse moves over it. So we're going to go for a small little for loop. So we're going to go for row in grid, and then for item, where's that backslash from? And then for item in row, right? We're going to say if the item in focus cells, if the item is in the focus cells, and the len of focus cells is greater than 0, or greater than 1, right? We will then want to change the items attribute of focus. Remember, when we built it, we set it as false. We wanted to set it to true. Else, we wanted to say item focus is equal to false. All right. So once we've got our focus cells list, we then want to cycle through our entire grid, and we want to check our entire grid, each cell in our entire grid, and if that cell from our whole grid, so each cell, if it is in our list of focus cells, if it is in this list of focus cells, right, and the length of our focus cells list is greater than 1. I think we can save a bit of time. Let's rather just do it this way. I'm just going to change this slightly from my original program. I'm just going to say if len focus cells is greater than 1, right? If it's greater than 1. Just take that off, delete that. Then we will do this exercise. So there's no need for it to do this exercise every single time. The game updates. So we'd rather have it do this update if our length of focus cells is greater than 1. All right. Okay, we've got that. So we've gone through our grid, and we've changed each item in that grid from true to false. That's not going to work. We can't do this. We can't do this. We can't. The reason why we can't do this is that if we move our mouse from a group of cells that are already focused, we move it to a cell that will have a single block, those group of cells will still remain focused because there's nothing turning them off. See, this also not only does this little block of code here turn on the cells which need to be focused, it also turns them off if they're not under focus. So this is not going to work. So we also need to say and len focus cells is greater than 1. So this wasn't going to work. So I just want to put this back 1 column. All right. Anyway, so we can carry on. We're going to say return focus cells. All right, so now we've created a function and we're returning our focus cells. So our list of cells that are under focus. All right, so now we actually need to call this function, and we call this function in our input method, just by moving the mouse actually. So let's go to our input function in our main game class. Where's the input? At the start of our input function, I just want to include for row in self.cells, right? And then for item in row, if item rectangle, so basically now dot collide point with pygame.mouse dot get pers, right? So if the mouse cursor collides with any of these little cells or rectangles, And if the item is set to active, right? If the item is active, we want to say item focus will be equal to true, right? So that particular cell that we have, the item will be set to true. And then we want to call the focusAdjacentTiles self.cells, and item will be the cell passed to it. Okay, we've got that. The next thing we want to do, the last thing we need to do to actually be able to see this on the game, is we want to go to our draw method. And in our draw method, we're going to amend this little for loop here quickly. Okay, so for us row and self.cells, for item and row, right? If item active, if the item is active, right? If item attribute active is equal to, well, we can just leave it like that, because if it is true, that's right. And then we want to say if item focus, if item focus, come on, focus, and if item focus is basically set to true. If those two of them, we go self.GameScreen.blit item self.largeImage, right? And then item rectangle, and then we want to say inflate, which is a function or a method for Pygame rectangles that actually just like increases the size of the rectangle when called. 4 by 4 by 4, 4 pixels by 4 pixels. Okay. Else, and then we just want to call normal self.image if that's not the case. Let's just give this a run quickly, see if we break it. There we go. Okay, great. That's fantastic. It's working. So as you can see, if I move my mouse over this yellow cell by itself, nothing happens. If I move it over the purple cell to the left, they slightly increase in size. Move to the green one, nothing happens. The blue one, nothing happens. The yellow one, it becomes larger. So as you can see, as we move the mouse around on the board, the cells then increase in size and decrease in size. That seems to be working quite well. Fantastic. All right. I think the next thing we're going to do is, because we've got our game running currently, we've got a board that pops up. We've got all of our tiles and they're coming into focus, which is working quite well. I think the next we're going to do is we're going to add an event handler for clicking. So if we had to click on a cell, something would have to happen. So if I had to click on these 3 blue cells, they should be removed from the screen, all 3 of them. All right. And then a little bit later on, we'll build the function that once we've clicked those 3 cells, the cells above it should drop down. So let's go ahead and build the event handler for clicking on selecting a cell. Okay, so we're going to go up to our game method, our input, our game class, and the input method. Excuse me. So in our input method, where's my input here? For event in Pygame.event.get, underneath myself.run, we're going to add another one here. We're going to say if event.type is equal to Pygame.mouse button down. No, down. Right. If event.type is equal to Pygame.mouse button down, if event.button is equal to 1, basically if we push the left mouse button, we're going to go for I row in enumerate self.cells. I'm going to go for J col in enumerate row. Right, so we're basically looping through the cells to pick up where it is that our mouse has, which cell has our mouse collided with. We're going to say if col rectangle, remember each cell or col is actually a dictionary, and included in that dictionary is the Pygame rectangle, is the rectangle that we've created. So we want to always make sure that we're checking that rectangle dot collide point, Pygame.mouse.get pos. right. So if our item cell is colliding with the rectangle, is colliding with the mouse cursor, and we just want to perform a basic check quickly. We want to say if checkValidSelection. All right. And if checkValidSelection, so that's basically a function that we quickly need to create. So we're going to go down to our utility functions, and we're quickly going to go create that function. Now you might think this is a bit of a duplication. We already have a function that returns a list of focus cells. We could, in theory, just say, do the check to say if the length of focus cells, if the length, we could call this function focusAdjacentTiles and return to check, and just check the length of the return, length of the cells returned, length of the list that is returned, and if it's greater than 1, we should be able to select a cell, or it's a valid cell to select. The thing is, I don't want it to do this entire exercise. It already does the exercise, and then if we click, it would do the exercise again. And I don't want it to do that. I just basically want to perform a very quick check. And to perform a very quick check, basically just check if there's a cell next to it that is is the same cell. How can I say? It's the same. There's at least 2 cells next to each other. That's all I want to do. So I just want to perform a very quick check. So basically just check one cell next to it. So the arguments we're going to pass to it is grid, the cell, I, and j. All right. So then basically we just want to say if I is greater than 0, right? Then we're going to go with if I is greater than 0. So basically we're not in the top row. So we're going to check north. If grid I minus 1 j value, right, is equal to the cell value and grid I minus 1 j is also set to active, or not set to active, that the grid I minus 1 j active is set to true, and it's the same as my cell active. It's the same as my cell active, and my cell is actually active, right? If that's the case, we then just want to, there's already one cell that is connected to the cell that we've clicked on. So then we can just return the function already. We can return true. We have to do this. We're going to check south now. If I is less than len grid minus 1, right? We're just going to perform this entire check again. And the difference is we want to say I plus 1, I plus 1, cell is active. That's correct. Right. So I'm just going to copy and paste both of these, and now we're going to do the same checks for J, which would have been like for the J cell. So we say J, and then here it's going to just straightforward I, J minus 1. I, J minus 1. And then here it's going to be J plus 1. J plus 1. Right, now don't forget to change this if to J, and then the length of the grid. We can leave it like that, but let's rather keep it consistent and check the first nested list. All right. So perfectly, we're going to call this checkValidSelection. It's going to do all these checks, and if none of these checks return a true, we're going to return false, which means that basically this function that we're returning will be a false. So in our input method, when we clicked on a cell, it will return false. Okay, so checkValidSelection. What were the arguments we need to pass it? Let's try that again. grid cell IJ. Okay, grid is self.cells. What else do we need? What else do we need? Man. Parameter cell unfilled. What would be the cell if I have it correctly? Hang on. Why am I blanking on this? Why am I blanking on this? Come on. Not that difficult. Of course, it would be call and then IJ. So we're just doing a check to see if that's true. Once that's done, then we're going to perform clear adjacent cells. That's another function that we quickly need to create. So here, focusAdjacentTiles, checkValidSelection. I think I'm going to put it in just above the checkAdjacentCells. Where is it? checkValidSelection. I'm going to build it just above that one. So we're going to call it define clear. Nope, spelled it correctly. Clear adjacent cells. Right. Just want to clear the adjacent cells. And we need to pass it the grid, the cell, I, and the J. Basically the same as the checkValidSelection below. So in my clear adjacent cells, first thing we need to do is the cell that we actually pass to it, we need to change its active state to false. Right, that's the first thing we need to do. The second thing we need to do is we're going to current is equal to grid x y. Okay, so basically that is my x and that is my y. All right. Okay, so then we go. So there's another little block of code that we're going to unfortunately have to go through, but it's fairly quick. You should be able to follow along. We're going to say if my x is greater than 0 again, so we're checking that we're not in the top row, because if we're in the top row, we can't check north. Then we're going to say west is equal to, we're checking, we're not in the leftmost column. Anyway, west is equal to grid x minus 1 y. Right. If current value is equal to west value and west active is equal to true, then we want west active to equal false, right? Then we want to call this function again, grid west x minus 1 y. Forgot that we were using a bit of recursion in this one. Of course, it makes sense. We could have used it as a for loop, but we did the for loop one earlier when we did the focus cells. Now we're doing it as a recursive function, or we're using recursion. All right. So what we're doing is we've basically created our west variable. So this would be our x minus 1. So say the cell we select on was 5, 5. So then west would be 4, 5, right? However this thing works. Can't remember exactly, but then it's taking that one. So now here's my new position, 4, 5, and it's passing it to my recursion function call. All right. And then we're doing x minus 1 because, of course, my x position has changed. Yeah. And it basically will just follow through all of those blocks to make sure that they need to be cleared. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to if x is less than len grid minus 1. Right, so we're going to check to the east is equal to grid x plus 1. It could actually be north or south. I've just given it those names for now. Y, right? If current value is equal to east. I'm going to change that now quickly. That's bugging me. Value and east active is equal to true. All right. I'm going to say east active must change to false. And then we're going to call the function again. This time we're going to go grid east x plus 1. Okay, this is bugging me. So we're going to change it here. So here we're going to say north, 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 north. It actually doesn't really matter what we call this, as long as this is just a placeholder variable name. I mean, it's a lot easier to say this, use this, than to constantly type this in over here, and then over here, and then over here, and then over here again. So, you know, you could call this up, down, left, right if you wanted to. It really does not make a difference as long as this section is correct. Okay. All right. We're going to do the exact same thing again. We're going to copy this block of code, and now we're going to do it for the y values. Yeah. We're going to say if y is greater than 0. If it's greater than 0, so we're going to the east now. East. No, we're going west. Sorry, we're going west. We're going to the left. All right, remember to change this. This must now be -1. And this must be west. This must be west. And this must be west. This must be west. Don't forget to change this. +1. No, -1. See? Nearly screwed up. Then we go y. It's less than grid. First list in that nested list. Alright, now we want to say y +1. Now we're looking to the east. 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 +1. Okay, don't forget that +1. All right. So now we've done that. We should go ahead and take these arguments. Where's my input? Where is my input? There's my input method over here. Okay, so the grid is going to be self.cells. The cell will be col. My x will be, if I have it right, will be I. My y will be j. Okay. I should be able to run this now, and if we select a cell, it should disappear. Dum, dum, dum. Wait. Cool. I think that's going to be enough for this video. If I just click on another block, let's try that one. Let's do that one. Let's do that one. That's fantastic. Look at that. It's working. So don't forget, the cells are actually there. They're just not being drawn to the screen anymore because their attribute has been set to false for active. So they're no longer active. So therefore, they're not being drawn to the screen anymore. The next thing we're going to do in the next video is we're now going to make it so that once we've clicked on these cells, the cells above it must drop down. And then if we've cleared an entire cell. Oh yes, the other thing we need to check is if we click this one, nothing happens. You see it's a square by itself, nothing happens. You cannot click squares by themselves. What we want is as soon as the column has actually been cleared, then the cells will also move to the left. But that's enough for this video, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you've managed to follow along. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers for now.